What's up guys, my name is Devin and welcome back to another episode of Footballrs. In today's video, we're going to be unboxing and reviewing the brand new Nike Zoom Air Vapor Elite 1. Let's do it. All right guys, so here are the cleats we're going to be taking a look at today. Again, these are the Nike Air Zoom Vapor Elite 1. These are the highest tier Nike Vapor cleat for 2025. As you guys have known, if you guys watched the Speed video and the Pro video, there are three tiers, the Speed, Pro, and the Elite. So these are the top dog, most expensive, supposed to be the best option from Nike for speed cleats. First things first, let's take a look at the box. This is just going to be your normal orange Nike box. Of course, you got the swoosh on there, and here's a good look at the tag. Nike Zoom Air Vapor Elite 1, wolf gray, total orange, and of course these are an 8.5. So let's get the box open and see what we've got. Ooh, I forgot about this colorway. This colorway is very clean. I forgot I got it. It kind of reminds me of like a Nerf colorway, the blue and the orange, and then the gray is really nice as well. So every year, I'm honestly a huge fan of the Elites. One of my favorite cleats last year was the Elite model. Not a lot of people wear them, but I absolutely love them. I think they're just like the perfect blend of a skill cleat and kind of a big skill cleat, and I'm curious if that's going to be the case with these today. So in this part of the video, I'm going to give you guys my first impressions, first thoughts, unbox the cleats, go through it, talk about it a little bit, and then I will get them outside, test them, and then get you guys the full review and go through everything. So first, I want to go through the overall looks of the cleat, and right away, this is a good looking football cleat. I really like this colorway. I love the pops of color here at the bottom and in the swooshes. I will say the swooshes on here are raised, and the other two pairs, the Pro and the Speed, they were just kind of screen printed on, so that is cool. It's got that 3D effect to it. The inside one is screen printed on, and of course you have the Air Zoom detail, so these do have some Zoom Air Zoom in the forefoot here, so that's going to be fun to take a look at. We did already look at it with the Pros, but we're going to look at it again with the Elites. The upper material on here, I'm pretty sure this is Flyknit, and then you've got some fly wire cables, so these cables are going to run through these channels, so basically, so when you tie these up, those cables tighten up and give you a nice secure fit all the way around. There is some sort of like rubbery overlay over the Flyknit. I wish you guys could feel it, but it kind of gives it like a sticky, grippy texture almost. You can actually hear it cracking actually. Hang on. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but it's kind of weird. That overlay kind of covers pretty much all of the Flyknit, so I do wonder how much these cleats are going to weigh. You do see kind of like how the color changes from dark gray to regular gray. I don't love how it looks from an aesthetic standpoint, but I'm pretty sure that's just from where the covering is, the coating, to where there's no coating. I'm pretty sure that's all that means. Here's a good look at the tongue. You do have a big Vapor branding on there with a little tiny swoosh, and then these do have a nice little heel loop, which helps get them on a little bit easier. Always a big fan of that. Also, one of my favorite details on here is going to be the Air Zoom right there on the side of the traction plate. That's just super clean, and just overall, I really love the look of these, especially this colorway. I said it earlier, kind of gives me like Nerf vibes, and I think that holds true. I just think it's such a good looking colorway and football cleat. So now let's get the paper out and start to talk about some of the nitty gritty details. They are a little bit heavy. Of course, we're going to weigh them in the full review, but they're definitely not a light cleat. I know the Speeds were way heavier than I expected. The Pros were a little bit heavy, and I'm sure the Elites are going to be as well. But since it's a Flyknit material, maybe it'll be a little bit less. But like I said, they did do the 3D swooshes. They do have the overlay material on it. There's a lot of technology kind of packed into this cleat, so it won't surprise me if it's a little bit on the heavier side. So the first thing we'll talk about is the upper. I already mentioned it's a total Flyknit upper, and then it kind of has like this rubbery material over the top of it. I've always been a big fan of Flyknit. You know, it really peaked back in like, what was that, 2014, 2016 maybe. It was just kind of the material to go to. Soft, lightweight, super strong, kind of molds to your foot and gives you a great fitting football cleat. So hopefully that's the case with these. I do think it is just the outer part that is Flyknit. This cleat has an internal booty structure, kind of like both the Speeds and the Pros. There's like a booty system that kind of goes around your entire foot and hugs it. You guys can actually see it pretty good if you look in this little dark hole here. You guys can kind of see how there's like an inner sock liner that's going to wrap around your foot nicely. And the tongue itself is connected. You guys can kind of see where it splits off, but it is still one piece all the way through. So that's going to give you that nice sock-like feel a lot of you guys like. And then there is a little bit of a cuff on here. I mean, this is all it really is. It's still a pretty low-based football cleat. Last year's Elites were like kind of mid-cut almost. You guys can kind of see how this one's a little bit higher, a little bit more padding. I really like these, so I'm a little disappointed to see that they went away from kind of that mid look. Hopefully these are as good as they look. Let's take a look at the lacing system. So it is pretty much traditional lacing system, but these do have those fly wire cables. So that's going to be these cables you guys see all the way up the cleat. These cables actually run through the Flyknit to the base of the cleat. So when you tighten these up, pulls those cables tight and gives you a nice tight fit all the way around. These do not have the runner's loop that we've been talking about on the Speeds and the Pros. So the runner's loop is kind of that extra eyelet slit you get down here that kind of helps you lace it up a specific way to get that extra heel lockdown, but these do not have that. So if that's something you need, don't buy these. Next thing, we got to talk about the tongue. Now I'm really pumped about this tongue because look at the padding. So it's a nice thick padding. So one thing that always bothers me with football cleats is when they don't put padding on the tongue, because you lace these laces up and you feel them kind of digging into the top of your foot. So a little bit of padding helps alleviate that and give the cleat a more comfortable fit overall. So I'm very excited about it. Kind of feels like almost a neoprene padding in here. So hopefully that feels nice. And then the top of the tongue is a different material, still padded, but a little bit thinner. You guys can actually see kind of the padding on there. And then of course there's a slit at the top, so this kind of helps it rest more naturally on the top of your ankle. So that's always nice to have as well. Then you guys can see where the two materials are stitched together. That looks like a high quality stitch, something to look at when you're thinking about durability. Next up, let's take a look at the padding in the cleat. So the pros did not have much padding whatsoever, and I think these are going to kind of follow that suit. Honestly, the padding looks super thin. Like if you compare it to last year's, like that padding is so much thicker than this padding. So for some reason, they went away from a bunch of padding. So I'm a little bit skeptical on how they're going to feel. There's definitely some thin padding there. And then let's take a look at the insole. So the insole is glued in, so we got to rip the glue. So just like the last two, you guys can see where it was glued in, no glue in the toe. And then let's take a look at what's underneath. So that's what's underneath. No plastic shank like the last model, but you do get some Zoom Air in the forefoot, but unfortunately you can't see it. So that's kind of a bummer. We'll talk about the traction blade here in a bit. You can't really see the actual Zoom Air bubble that's in there. So kind of a bummer. Get this back in there. So now I think we've talked about the upper enough. It's time to talk about the traction plate. So this is an all new traction plate from Nike this year. If you guys have watched the speeds and the pros video, I've already talked about this traction plate a bunch, but we're gonna go through it once more. So this traction plate is very reminiscent of a soccer traction plate, and that's because of this little circle here. And this circle, it works very well for soccer players. It kind of helps them turn gradually while maintaining grip, and that's something a lot of skill players need also. I've said it before, I'll say it again, soccer players and skilled football players honestly share a lot of similar movements when running in the open field. Of course, you're not gonna get the intense cutting in soccer that you get in football, but that's where these edge studs come in. So as you guys can see, these studs in the blue part are kind of placed really wide. So like when you go to cut, this stud is the first thing hitting the dirt because it's so widely placed, and it's sharp as well. So you get these blade studs all around. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then you have the 4 studs kind of on this circle piece as well. In the rear, you just have 3 studs here. Honestly, would have preferred 4. I'm not really sure why they went to 3. I'm sure it doesn't make too much of a difference, but something to note. I will say that one of the most popular and loved traction plates from Nike did have just 3 spikes in the back, so I guess that's something that's worth noting. Also, something else, it's pretty easy to see on this pair specifically, but you guys can see that plastic grid kind of underneath the cleat. So previously it was right below the insole, and the insole actually kind of locked into it, but this is what gives the plate its strength and rigidity and allows you to kind of flex and move around. Then there's this beam that kind of runs through, and this is going to help your foot kind of move naturally and kind of flex, and the cleat is just going to work with your foot better with that. And there's that air zoom unit right in the forefoot. So when I tried the pros, they have these as well. The speeds do not, but it felt pretty good. I was really happy with it. And the cleat itself wasn't super comfortable, but I have high hopes for these because they're a fly knit, so I'm thinking they're going to be a little bit nicer on my feet. So I'm very excited to see how they fit and feel. Also, I should have mentioned this earlier when talking about the padding, but there is still a nice spot for your heel to kind of slot in and get really locked in there. Even though there's no heel loop, I don't think you'll have any issues with your heel kind of coming up out of the back of the cleat. I think you're going to have a nice, safe and secure fit all the way around with these. But I think that about covers it for my first impressions, first look, unboxing. Let's get these on the field and get you guys that full review. Now that you guys have watched the unboxing and first impression, it's time to review them. In the review, we're going to cover a bunch of stuff. We're going to talk about the comfort, the fit and support. We're going to weigh the cleats. We're going to talk about the traction, the style, what position these cleats are best for, and of course, the price. The first thing we're going to talk about is the comfort. The comfort on these is honestly pretty solid. It's much better than the speeds and pros I reviewed last week. The upper on these is made from Flyknit, which is a much less stiff material than the synthetic they used on the 2 lower tier models. There is a thin overlay on the Flyknit that stiffens it up a bit, but not too much. Overall, the material is soft. It breaks in very nicely and tends to mold to your foot for a bit of a unique fit. While the other 2 models are super raw feeling, this one is a bit more cozy all around. This cleat does have a booty system underneath the Flyknit that wraps around your foot and feels pretty nice. The tongue on these is easily my favorite of the bunch. It's a thicker, padded tongue and feels great on the top of your foot. It helps to reduce the pressure of the laces, and then the top is cut to help it sit on your foot more naturally. With these ones, I didn't really experience any parts of the cleat digging into my foot and ankle like I did with some of the other Nike cleats, which was nice. And again, I attribute this to the Flyknit. It's just a much nicer and more workable material that feels much better for me personally. Now let's talk about the cushioning. These have the same super thin insole that Nike has been rolling with for years now. And then just like the Pros, these have the Nike Zoom Air in the forefoot, which I've been a big fan of so far. You really do feel it, but it doesn't give the cleat an overly cushy feel. It's just a really nice balance overall. Now the padding inside the cleat is a bit thin for my liking, but I didn't find any discomforts because of that. These do also have a rear heel loop, which always makes it easier to slip on the cleats. Overall, the comfort on these is definitely my favorite of the trio of Nike cleats that have dropped. I love how the Flyknit feels, the padding on the tongue is nice, and then the Zoom Air feels really nice underfoot. The next thing we're going to talk about is the fit and support. These cleats do fit true to size. For the other two Nike Vapor cleats we reviewed, I was telling you guys to go up half a size or even a full size, but these fit perfect for me. These weren't too cramped in the toe box, and I had enough room on the sides of my feet to breathe, which is something I look for in a football cleat. The Flyknit forms nicely to your foot, and the Flywire is a classic tried and true lacing system and still great in 2025. But that brings me to my biggest gripe with the cleat: the heel lockdown. No matter how tight I lace them up, I could not get my heel to feel secure in these. When running full speed, I could feel just the slightest lift in my heel inside the cleat, and I think that's because of the padding in the heel. With both the Speeds and Pros, there's a slot where your heel kind of fits into, and you just don't get that same feel with these Elites. And another thing that probably attributes to that is the lack of a runner's loop on these. With both the Speeds and Pros, they gave us an extra eyelet that helps with the heel lockdown, and these just simply don't have it. I think the cleat just needs a hair more padding in the rear, or maybe something even as simple as just double socking. I love every aspect of the fit on these, but the heel lockdown is the one blemish of the football cleat. And then the support on these is about what you'd expect. The Flyknit is a strong, lightweight material that holds your foot in there tightly and securely. The added overlay on the material also gives a little bit more strength and durability as well. When going to cut, you feel good inside the cleat and it feels like it's glued to your body, aside from the heel. Overall, I love the fit and feel of the Flyknit, but the heel lockdown just simply isn't where it needs to be. The next thing we're gonna do is weigh the cleat. These cleats weighed in at 11.5 ounces. This makes them the heaviest of the Nike Vapor trio, which is pretty expected for the Elites. The Elites always tend to be the heaviest because they are usually packed with lots of technology, and these are no different. These have the Zoom Air, Flyknit, and Flywire, so it makes sense. I will say they don't feel as heavy on foot. They just feel like any other average skill football cleat as far as weight goes. The next thing we're going to talk about is the traction. Now, I'm sure you guys are sick of hearing me talk about this traction plate since I talked about it with the Speeds and the Pros, but it's the same traction plate, so let's do it again. This is an all-new traction plate from Nike and very reminiscent of a soccer traction plate. It's a one-piece traction plate with a bunch of unique shaped studs throughout. In the front, it's got 9 blade studs around the outside and then 4 studs in the circle part of the cleat. Those outside studs help dig into the dirt and cut, and then that inner circle part is super popular on soccer cleats. It kind of helps them turn while running full speed and still have plenty of grip while doing so. And then in the rear, we've got 3 blade studs. This is pretty standard and helps with just about everything. In the middle of the traction plate, you'll see this kind of beam that runs through it, and this beam allows the plate to intentionally flex and move with your natural foot movement. This also gives the cleat a bit of rigidity, but the plate itself is still super flexible. I do want to say, for whatever reason, the Elites are a little bit less flexible than the Pros and Speeds, which is something I like. It gives the cleat a little bit more spring. With the Pros and Speeds, I could pretty much fold them in half, but this one, I can't quite get there, so a little bit more spring out of this one. I don't know why. It's the same plate, but maybe the upper, I don't know. You tell me. With that being said, it's not as springy as the past Nike football cleats, but still does pretty well. And I do like this plate with the Air Zoom in the forefoot. I just think it gives it a nice, cushy, but still responsive feel, and it's very comfortable underneath foot. But yeah, with this traction plate, I felt pretty good going in and out of cuts, no problem. Grips on the ground, cutting a dime, do what you gotta do, gets the job done. Overall, it's still a good traction plate, but I'm not sure if it's my favorite one on the market like Nikes have been in the past. I think there's a lot of good options right there, but this one is definitely solid. The next thing we're going to talk about is the style. Now, I really like how these look. Typically, the Elite model is a bit more polarizing, but this year they kept it pretty simple. It looks pretty similar to the Speed, but with a slightly higher cuff, Flyknit upper, and of course the Flyknit cables. The Elite does get the 3D swoosh, which is always a nice touch. I think these are just a really clean silhouette through and through. Nothing crazy, just a clean looking football cleat. As far as colorways, they definitely don't have as many as the Speed and Pros, but they still have some really solid ones. Of course, they have the standard all white and all black, and then some fun ones like the gray, orange, and blue ones that we have been looking at this whole video. Overall, I really like how they look. The next thing we're going to talk about is what position these cleats are best for. These are a skill football cleat. In the past, we've seen the Nike Vapor Elite models kind of be an in-between cleat. For example, the last version was suitable both for skill guys and big skill guys, but these ones just feel like a skill cleat. No high cuff or extra support. They're just like the Speed with some upgraded materials. So I'll say these are going to be a good option for QBs, running backs, wide receivers, and DBs. I'm sure we're going to see a fair share of speed linebackers and tight ends in these as well, but my recommendation is just the skill guys. The next thing we're going to talk about is the price. These cleats retail for $220. And I'm sorry, but that's just simply outrageous. I like the cleats, but $220 for something as simple as these just seems absolutely insane. And I don't know if I can ever justify spending that much on something that's not exclusive or rare or something like that. They're good cleats, but $220 is just nuts, man. But hey, if you got it like that, enjoy them. All right, guys, so overall, I like the cleats. The fly knit is comfortable and fits very nicely. The heel lockdown is definitely an issue, but I think that can be solved just by double socking. The new traction plate is all right, but I do think the Zoom Air makes it a little bit better, so I definitely like this plate better than the one on the Speeds. The silhouette is clean, the colorways are nice, but $220 is just too much for this football cleat in my opinion. Again, I like the cleats a lot, but $220 just prices them out of most people's budgets. There you guys have it. There's the full unboxing review on the Nike Air Zoom Vapor Elite 1. Hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, make sure to like the video, comment what you guys want to see us do next, and make sure you guys subscribe for more videos just like this one. My name is Devin, and thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode of Footballrs.